Open up, Colorado. It's 420. Time to grind and burn.
This is not your son's stoner show.
Welcome to the Grind and Burn.
Good day, good evening, hello. My name is Kate Mullen, and you're listening to Cannabis Community Project. Remember, you can always contact us at the show with any suggestions you have or interview ideas. Simply contact us at contact@cannabiscommunityproject.com. And we're glad you're listening to the show. Why do you want to listen to this show? Because we're going to talk about everything that is cannabis related, from cannabis entrepreneurialism, cannabis business, cannabis concepts and ideas. Let us hear from you. Contact at cannabiscommunityproject.com.
Are you still smoking flower? Stinking up the house? Having your neighbors wonder if there's a skunk outside? Try Cushley products, the natural organic odor eliminator. Lotions, sprays, candles, and soaps. Cushley will eliminate all of those organic smells. Cushley. www.cushley.com.
I'm Kate Mullen, filling in for Brainstorm, and I bring to the table many years of entrepreneurialism, publicity experience, and we would like to share what we know with you, as well as hear from what you've got going on. So the goal of the show is to give you information to help you move forward in your cannabis entrepreneurial efforts, move forward in your cannabis business efforts, and find out what you need to know to get into the cannabis business, whether it's investment, whether it's business development, or an ancillary business to the cannabis industry. There's a lot going on, and you can absolutely plug in, and you can absolutely plug in here with Cannabis Community Project. Where can you find us? Well, you can find us pretty much anywhere on the internet. You can start with SoundCloud, Spreaker, iTunes, Massroots. We're everywhere. Facebook, Tumblr, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spreaker, Twitter. So check us out everywhere on the internet.
That's New Soldier and the Keith Army. Yeah!
So let me break down a little bit about what I do. I am always willing to hear about what people have got going on in their lives, and I also am interested in getting people information, current and relevant information that is true news, that is relevant news, and also bring to you a way to sort of decide what is true and relevant with regard to the cannabis industry and the development of the cannabis industry federally. I bring probably 25 years plus of activism, publicity, television, and film and radio experience. So if you want to know whatever you want to know, I'm here to help you or find somebody that can help you. That's kind of what sets me apart.
Have you ever seen a business or a product and thought, what a sack of shit that is? I could do a better job. Well, let us help you get there. Make 2017 your year of cannapreneurism. Contact me directly. Brainstorm at cannabiscommunityproject.com.
Joseph Startown has set this place on fire. Burn it down entirely. Seneca T will make a sound expired. Brimstone, thunder, and lightning. Herbal Kira set this place on fire. Burn it down entirely. GG Pop will make anyone expire. Brimstone, thunder, and lightning. Essential extracts, both more shots than Neymar. And drop bombs, near palm. Midi cars, no plate arm. Babylon a figure safe. Kill arthritis and cancer. And slaughter corruption. Extract artists a marksman. With the THC in a them eye. Tea play music for the soldiers. For the youths like carry books and carry folders. And for the woman then him don't stop show love. Nika T I turn up every program. Flashy me lots, here come the rush. Fire away gash, hit them a catch. No me not stop until Babylon crash. Them head full of gas so them pass with a march. Snap on my fingers, them run in a flash. Anything but it clean at the trash. Dust to dust and ash to ash. Joseph Startown has set this place on fire. Burn it down entirely. Seneca T will make a sound expire. Brimstone, thunder, and lightning. Herbal Kira set this place on fire. Burn it down entirely. Seneca T will make a sound expire. Brimstone, thunder, and lightning. Herbal Sierra set this place on fire. Burn it down entirely. GG4 will make anyone expire. Brimstone, thunder, and lightning. Set this place on fire.
So where can we start? I got a great guest for you here. This man is amazing. His name is Bruce Kennedy. He's a journalist for the last 7 years, has been on top of the cannabis industry and all the changes that are happening within the cannabis industry. Mr. Kennedy will tell you a little bit about where he comes from and what his credentials are, but I think you're going to be amazed and impressed with what this guy has to say. So let me introduce today Bruce Kennedy. Welcome to the show, Bruce.
Damn, Miss Kate, I don't know what to say after an introduction like that. It's like, how do you top that? Well, thank you so much. Good to be here.
Glad you're here. So you bring how many years of cannabis interest to the table?
Well, I'm a bit older than you. I grew up in New York City, and I am a child of the 70s, and certainly remember walking around the streets of Manhattan with the Rolling Stones blaring in the background, hearing smoke, 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 and walking through clouds of marijuana smoke at street festivals and street parties and everything else. I grew up in an environment where marijuana was, well, let's say frowned on officially, but was seemed to be everywhere at once. So I've been interested, let's say I've not been a smoker forever, but I've been interested in marijuana and the culture since I was a teenager, and that was a while ago. Then I got into news. After college, I was an overseas Asian studies major, started to travel around the world, did not do any cannabis while I was in Asia because you get thrown away with the key thrown away with you if they're found doing stuff like that. Sort of got my journalism chops overseas, came back, worked all over the place. Eventually, I was at CNN for about 14 years, NPR after that. Was headhunted out here. The job I was hired for went away with the recession, and I ended up freelancing business news for a bunch of different people, including The Guardian in the UK, AOL, MSN, CBS, and basically developed for myself my own cannabis beat. There were not too many people out here who were actually covering it when I first came out nearly 10 years ago. And starting in 2000, began to write on a regular basis about the legal cannabis industry here in Colorado.
Wow, you have really been here from almost before the seed was planted. Was it just fortuitous, or was 10 years ago, was it an aggressive cannabis business?
Well, let's start with 2008, because that's really when I was here. It's funny, for people who know Denver, that whole stretch of Broadway, which is now called the Green Mile.
Yeah, Broadsterdam, the Green Mile, yeah.
Which is where all the antique shops were. When I first was out here, I had neighbors here in suburbia like, oh, be careful out there. It's kind of scary and dangerous. And it looked questionable. Back then, the dispensaries, which were the medical dispensaries, all looked a bit, flaky. It was all plywood and spray paint. And, there were a couple that actually had neon signs, and that was a big deal. But, yeah, it's definitely sort of fly-by-night. The rules were very open. A lot of the rules that have come in place since, obviously, have changed the industry radically. And, of course, Proposition 64 here in Colorado, which legalized marijuana for recreational use, which was groundbreaking, really changed things. But it also really kind of separated the wheat from the chaff in terms of who could grow and why. Instead of having the vertical integration where you had cannabis companies had to, I think it was the 70-30 rule, they had to produce 70% of their own product, and that began to change. You had zoning laws, which meant that if you had a dispensary too close to a school or something, it had to shut down. So it's been going through some pretty radical changes, as anyone who's been out here for a while certainly knows. And we've gone from those plywood and spray paint dispensaries to these incredible Apple store-like places on the 16th Street Mall and elsewhere in Metro Denver. And it's become much more acceptable. It's funny. I'm from the East Coast. I have friends who come out here, and they sort of expect everybody to be, stoned and dithering in the streets. And they're like, where are all the potheads? And I go, oh, they're at home,
Do you find that the average age of the cannabists that you're encountering or that you've encountered over the last 10 years, has the age range stayed true? In my mind, for what we see in the Trinidad area, we get a lot of the 4-state area business. And what we've found in our business is that probably 70% of our business is 45-year-olds to 75-year-olds. Has that age range stayed true over the last years?
Well, it's been funny. I don't want to give the wrong impression, but for stories, I will actually stand in the parking lots of dispensaries and talk to people. And when you do that, if you hang out for an hour or so, you start to meet people mostly in their 50s and 60s driving really nice cars. Some of them are local, some of them are just coming in. And I have some facts here, statistics, but the CDC was saying how the greatest percentage of people who are actually consuming cannabis right now are in their 50s and 60s. And I think what's happening is that there are people my age who remember it from, their teenage or college years, are coming back to it, finding that they miss it, or finding that it actually helps them with their rheumatoid arthritis.
Or enhances their life experience overall.
Exactly.
Or it's just fun to go and be in a place where legal cannabis exists. I mean, it's just fun.
It's just hysterical, if you come with someone from out of state or someone who's new to cannabis and have them walk in, and someone who's familiar with it from decades ago, have them walk into a dispensary and smell a mason jar. It's just their eyes get huge. It's just like, what are we doing? My goodness.
And why are we not doing this everywhere? My question is, and just a speculation as a journalist, and because I know you hit a lot of high points, and this is a question that I didn't ask in the pre-interview, but why do you think Proposition 64 has not been duplicated in every state in the union that wants legal cannabis?
It's, Justice Brandeis, the Supreme Court justice way back when, said the states are the laboratories of democracy, meaning that this is where a lot of the law that eventually becomes national law gets started and eventually used all over. Despite everybody talking about how uniform the U.S. is, it isn't. There's a lot of differences, political differences, cultural differences, the way people perceive life and law, and I think you just get a lot of very different cultures involved. What works here, Colorado has always sort of been tolerant. It's politically, they call it a purple state. It's like 30-30-30 conservative, progressive, and independent, and I think that's always sort of been the approach. And, it give a lot of credit to the state medical cannabis people because they really did create the template that a lot of other states are looking at. But it's fascinating because, you now have 28 states plus Washington, D.C. with some form of medicinal cannabis. And this is in places like, Jeff Sessions' own Alabama, which actually allows a certain level of cannabis oil for particular situations. Place in the Deep South where I worked forever, like Georgia and South Carolina. Your own blessed Texas is now actually talking very seriously about having some sort of marijuana legalization. And there's just an article today that one of the next marijuana bills that is actually looks like it might have some traction is in Nebraska, of all places. And if you remember, Nebraska and Oklahoma were the two states that filed protests in the Supreme Court trying to get Colorado to shut down the marijuana industry here.
Because they were so busy busting people.
Yeah, because it was bleeding borders and affecting them.
But, Nebraska, the breadbasket of the country, I believe their main product is agriculture to begin with. Why not cannabis? Why not hemp? Whether it's marijuana, whether it's hemp, why not?
That leads into, Kate, another thing is that industrial hemp is now a huge trend. There are now, I think, 30 states. For people who aren't aware, and I'll just, this is probably not the audience here, but hemp is a form of cannabis, like marijuana, but it's bred differently, it's grown differently. It's used mostly as agricultural product, either as feed, or it can be made into paper, or it can be made into rope. And Renault and a bunch of other people now use hemp in their auto bodies. So yeah, it's also used as industrial lubrication. I think I mentioned paper, but food hemp oil. The problem is that it's a cannabis, and so it is federally illegal. And right now, the U.S. imports $500 million worth of hemp every year, mostly from Canada and the Far East.
China, I've heard Canada, China, even Brazil produces hemp. But as I understand from what I've read, China and Brazil and Russian hemp are not the same cannabis. They're not the clean cannabis. And what are your thoughts on locally, when I say locally, Colorado-produced high-potency proprietary strains of hemp that are grown specifically for low-THC CBDs?
Well, I've actually been working with a hemp organization in the Springs area, helping them with some of their communications, and that's a very good point. A lot of the hemp you get overseas is not only poor quality, being very low in cannabidiols, CBDs, but hemp is what they call a phytoremediant. When you put it it into the ground, it'll bring up the toxins. They're using it in places like Chernobyl to help get rid or at least mediate some of the radioactivity there. They're using it in places in Italy where they've had the ground poisoned by chemicals. So the problem is that when you bring the hemp in from those places where you have no idea of the quality, you could be bringing in toxins with it. What's happening here in Colorado and other hemp-friendly states, a lot of states now have hemp research programs, mostly through universities, but here in Colorado, where it is legal, they are growing hemp and breeding it specifically to make sure that it is high potency and high percentage in the cannabidiols that people are looking for. And of course, those cannabidiols right now, they're finding they have incredible uses for things like Crohn's disease and muscular dystrophy and epilepsy and all these ailments. This is still a hugely untouched field. So there's a lot going on. And also, hemp has by law, has less than 0.3% of THC, which is the compound that gets you high. So it is legal in most places. Technically, it is still illegal under federal law, however. But again, Colorado is really kind of leading the nation. I mean, there are other states like Kentucky that are doing this, but Colorado is really kind of out there in front, making progress in terms of coming up with the best possible hemp and hemp products right now.
Well, and also let me add this to the conversation. Those states that are considering legalization of cannabis in whatever form it is, whether it's hemp or marijuana, and I use this example of Texas because I am from Texas and I do keep up on what's happening in the Texas ledge. And yes, they are considering some bills moving forward, several bills. One is the compassionate care that allows for CBD oil to be prescribed. But they also have some things that are so archaic, like they're also in Texas considering a marijuana court. Well, how's that moving forward, right? The other thing is that I believe Texans particularly, and I can't speak to other states because I'm not aware, but Texans are really, I hate to say, being misled by lawmakers because they really are. You've got all of these people in Texas that are jazzed up and excited about growing marijuana when they're talking about the Compassionate Care Act. Well, if you don't do your research, and this is the point of my statement, if you don't do your research, you're going to get behind something that's not possible. In other words, you're not going to get low THC CBDs from marijuana. You're just not. You'd have to reverse engineer high potency cannabis down to not have any THC in it when it's designed specifically for high amounts of THC. So that's a misnomer that Texans really are not clear on, that they don't understand that you can't go out and start buying land or a greenhouse and grow cannabis in it to get low to no THC CBDs.
It gets back to the point you were mentioning, though, about each of the states. This is an agricultural product, and Texas is a big agricultural producer. So I think you have people there who have all this anticipation of what they can get out of both, marijuana and cannabis, hemp, and a lot of it's not that realistic. I actually worked with an immigration lawyer here in Denver who wanted to have me help them with a bulletin they were sending out to new immigrants from Asia because there's something going through the Chinese and Southeast Asian community saying, come to Colorado, you can grow 99 marijuana plants, make a lot of money, no one will bother you, and of course that's not true. People have a lot of other hopes and dreams sort of invested in this, but they're not aware of the actual laws, and the problem is the laws keep changing, and they keep changing from state to state. So that's just the point I'm trying to underscore what you were saying, Kate.
And they change the more informed the public gets, and the more active the public gets. I've always been a passive activist in whatever they're passionate about, but certainly in the cannabis discussion, if you want something to occur, good or bad, in the cannabis discussion, you got to show up. You got to write your legislatures. You got to do your research. So regardless of how much news you're getting from any source, you really need to find out what the details are and really dig deep before starting your cannabis business or your cannabis entrepreneur or any concept that you're going forward with.
The problem is we're still in the gold rush stage, and that's why you're having 300 people a week, 100,000 a year moving out to Metro Denver right now.
Oh yeah. Look at Broadway. I don't know how many people have ever experienced Denver, Colorado. It's really a beautiful place. It reminds me a lot of Dallas, actually. Broadway, like you said, was a funky, questionable place down that end of it. And now it's wall-to-wall, funky stores, dispensaries, restaurants, record shops, all kinds of wonderful gentrification has taken place because of the cannabis industry. I can speak what's going on in Trinidad and southeast Colorado because we serve the four-state area. That there was a spike in homes sales last year that was like the biggest spike Trinidad has ever experienced. And it's directly, I believe, related to the availability of legal cannabis.
The rising tide lifts all boats, and what's happening in Colorado in general, not just in the Metro Denver area, I think is occurring all over the state.
Oh, absolutely. And, the other point is it's not just the streets that the cannabis stores are on or the dispensaries are on. Like, for instance, on Broadway, the dispensary stores are all on Broadway. Yeah, but that neighborhood behind it originally was kind of a rough neighborhood. I mean, it has beautiful historic houses. I mean, lovely gingerbread type houses. But so many of them were in such disrepair as recently as 2 years ago. And now you look at the houses that are right behind Broadway, and those prices have doubled and tripled. You look at all of the real estate along Broadway and along the surrounding areas and where it's legal in that part of the state. Even in any part of the state, I believe, all of those areas have gentrified. All of those areas are now cannabis friendly and making money, even the vacation destinations and that sort of thing.
Well, it's also the money that the state is actually getting from these cannabis organizations. There was a complaint, here in Denver and in the suburbia going, why aren't we seeing this money going into our schools? Well, it's because it's going to the rural high country schools first. And those are the places that are actually benefiting from the revenue that's coming from all these marijuana sales. It's also helping things like the road. I don't know if you remember in, 2013 when they had those huge floods that basically took out the roads outside of Boulder 36 up to Estes Park. Mm-hmm. Those were all put to get back together within record time for an American construction project and beautifully done. And a lot of that, I believe, was the infrastructure was helped with cannabis revenue. It's changed the state, and I think a lot of people are coming out here and just kind of salivating, seeing the potential involved, especially the financial potential.
So in the last 10 years, speaking as a journalist, kind of keeping your eye on the high points of what's happened in the cannabis industry, as far as an entrepreneur goes, or someone that has a cannabis-related concept, what do you see are the biggest challenges for an entrepreneur?
Well, right now, it's really kind of selling your idea. Everybody has an idea. I run into it all the time. As a journalist, I'm constantly getting press releases and all coming across my desk with all these different thoughts. But, I think what seems to work are kind of the off-the-wall ideas or the niche ideas, not necessarily something within the industry. I just did a story. The groups I work for is out of New York. It's a cannabis B2B group called bluntnetwork.com. I recommend them if you're interested in business. And I just put up a story there. I write original stories for them, but I just put up a story there that came from the mining news, which is kind of obscure, but I tend to troll all the weird websites. And it was about a company in Canada that produces potash, which is a mineral. It's used as fertilizer. It's used all over the world. And they were having trouble because the potash cartel apparently has broken down. But they found that they can sell potash as a fertilizer to organic marijuana grows, and it's working. So it's like this kind of strange idea, yeah. And that's entrepreneurship in its purest form, I think. It's like sort of taking this and like, how do we apply this now? There are lots of other things. LED lights. I was going to mention you're going to ask about trends. Light-emitting diodes, which are the things that you see in cars and all, they're the lights. There's a huge controversy within the grow community about them. Mostly they use the high sodium lamps, which sort of simulate the sunlight. This is for indoor grows. But light-emitting diodes have become the big thing now. And you have situations where former scientists from NASA, people who are specializing in deep space exploration, where astronauts could start to grow their own food in space, they're bringing their technology and experience into the cannabis sector and are helping to perfect LED lighting, which is, first of all, much more energy efficient. Most of the high sodium lamps generate heat. And, of course, when you have too much heat, that's not good for plants, so you have to get in air conditioning and humidifiers and all that. LED lights don't need all that. Now, they don't have the same spectrum, the spectrum that's needed for photosynthesis in a plant, but that's being changed and perfected. I get into these rooms sometimes where you get, like, these heated conversations between people from the different lighting camps, but that's just kind of an example of the entrepreneurism that's going on. And you have people who are literally tinkering in their garage trying to come up with, the best LED lights they can, thinking that this is going to make it. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on, a lot of invention, a lot of brainstorming, which is really kind of refreshing to see. There's people are always worrying about whether America still has ideas. Well, guess what? In the cannabis sector, they surely do.
It's certainly popping up everywhere, and I notice a lot of different cannabis ancillary businesses, and not only as smoke lounges and head shops and that sort of thing. If you look at cities or certainly little towns that are developing cannabis, I think you'll find that many of them are forgetting the ancillary businesses that are not cannabis related. So like you have a dispensary on Main Street and you have an edibles company. What you really need is like a local chocolatier. You need a local bakery. I mean, you think of all these people that are smoking pot. What's the natural thing that comes to mind? Well, if you're unhappy with your life in state X, come and open a restaurant somewhere in Colorado. Come and open a chocolatier or a bakery. Come and open a roller rink or a paintball course, because cannabis enthusiasts like to do things, and cannabis enthusiasts have a lot of money.
I mean, I think it's incredibly true. That's something they've seen in the high country at the ski resorts forever. Even though they don't condone people skiing or hiking or snowboarding while high, it certainly seems to be part of the culture there. And from what I hear, the dispensaries up in places like Alma and Breckenridge are doing just fine, thank you. And that's part of it. But what you say, I mean, in the cities is very true as well. You're always going to need a restaurant somewhere if people are parking and walking around and just kind of taking in the sights. The ancillary side of it is huge. And on top of that, there are the people who are, making the pipes and helping to do the lighting and, the glazing, the glass in the dispensaries.
So much of it is missing where you have great cannabis shops, but you don't have the infrastructure that probably could be there.
But, coming into place. And that's what surprises me. I go to dispensaries that 5 and 6 years ago were in sort of a shady part of town, as you mentioned. And, yeah, it's changed. There's now rental apartments and little boutiques and little coffee shops. And, and some people just seem to be very sort of comfortable with it. And just sort of to segue into what you're talking about with pastries, edibles are a huge industry now. I think last year, 40% of all cannabis sales in the state of Colorado were in edible form.
Which is amazing to me, because we're all old hippies and we've been smoking pot all our lives. And now, now everybody's getting edibles. Do you think it's the old hippies that are buying them, or?
I think it's people who, well, first of all, don't want to smoke, because it's not healthy and are afraid of the vapors and all, or, I have asthma, so I can't really smoke, and I prefer an edible. I mean, the thing is with edibles is that you have to be educated about using them. There's the famous Maureen Dow, the New York Times columnist, who came and ate 100 milligrams. She was like sitting in fetal position in her hotel bed waiting for the police to knock down the door or die or both.
Waste of a good high.
People are learning. I mean, that's the big thing as well. This state really has been a groundbreaker in so many ways because, people make fun of the Good to Know campaign that the state did. It's kind of hokey, but it has decent information, and people from out of town will go, oh, yeah, I saw that state thing. And, yeah, if I'm going to eat an edible, just a small piece, wait an hour, I'm like, yeah, good Boy Scout you are. Terrific. That's
right.
How it works.
And I think sometimes it may be a little misleading to people that have the bravado to think they understand, and they're going to eat a candy bar because in a normal sitting, in any other situation, they would eat an entire candy bar.
Well, that's the problem. And that's the educational part of it. And, and the same thing goes for vaping or dabbing. I mean, the marijuana right now, the levels of it, the ag students and the chemists and, all the nerds that we grew up with, guess what? They've been dabbling in this, and they have increased the potency. I think the average potency right now is like 15% THC in what's here, and that's at least twice as much compared to what was out there in the 70s and 80s.
And it's a lot different than the pot you get from the cartels. What they call cartel weed, where it's not hydroponically grown, it's not specialist, it's that Jimson kind of dirt weed.
Right.
It's not the same thing.
Kind of like what the U.S. government is growing.
Yeah, a lot like what the U.S. government is growing. So if you could say anything to our listeners, business people, cannabis entrepreneurs and concept creators and people that are just curious about the cannabis business, curious about cannabis, John Q. Public, what would you say to them?
I'd say, first of all, don't believe the hype, don't believe the stereotypes, and don't be afraid. This is something somebody said to me, which I thought was pretty profound. I'm going to see if I can get it right. This is an industry that has been around for 80 years. It's just finally coming into its own. It's coming out of the shadows. But, it's been there. Even if Jeff Sessions was to suddenly, the new Attorney General was to suddenly wave a wand and there was to be a massive national crackdown, it would still be there. And my feeling is he's not going to do that. So he's preoccupied with all sorts of other things right now. And our Jefe Trump, knows, at least he knows a business. I interviewed the man years ago, and I'm not going to go there, but it's just, he's a businessman. He realizes the multi-billion-dollar industry. I just think you have to get past all the Cheech and Chong stereotypes which are still out there, which drives me crazy. My friends who are in mainstream media, I talk with them and tell them that I'm doing this. They go, are you working high? Are you writing high? Like, no.
Wearing Jesus sandals and a tie-dye T-shirt?
I don't look good in tie-dye.
It doesn't look good with a tie.
No, not at all, especially a matching tie. This is a business, and this there's also this really interesting thing. It's more than a business, it's a mission. You still have people, and I've been talking to them from all over the place. I talk with people in Northern California and Washington State and Oregon and down in the South, people who are still sort of toiling in the darkness. But this is a mission for a lot of people. They are into this for decades, and they don't just see this as a way to line their pockets. They see cannabis as something special, something that helps life, something that helps people medically, something that's helped them through hard times, and it's important to them. So it's not just, no, how can I get rich off of this? They really have a mission. They're zealots about it. And that's sort of, I think, what makes it so unique is that you have people who really care about the product. And yes, there are people out there who are cutting corners, and you have all these issues with pesticides and stuff. I understand that, at least from an outside view, when somebody has all their money invested in a product, they're suddenly afraid of mites or something coming in and destroying millions of dollars worth of it. Yeah, they'll cut corners. I don't condone it. I don't think it's right, but it happens. But you also have the people out there who are now trying to do organic, pesticide-free cannabis. So there's also the whole movement to people getting out of the indoor warehouses into greenhouses and even outdoor grows. The industry is evolving. It's evolving so rapidly it makes my head spin sometimes. I try and keep track of laws just state to state. I've been talking with people in California today and yesterday, and of course, they're expecting cannabis there to become completely legal as of January 1st next year. And so they're in a scramble. They're trying to get all their regulatory stuff because for decades, they've had medical marijuana since '96. For decades, it's been this patchwork quilt of regulations by municipalities, or the local law enforcement just winked at it. And now suddenly it's like, oh my God, we got to get real. And it's terrifying them. So I would just say relax and roll with it because it's so overwhelming otherwise. But realize that this is more than just an industry. This is something that really has been a part of American culture for decades, and people are very passionate about and are trying to come out with the best product possible.
It's a great opportunity for a lot of people. Like you say, the Green Rush has just started. And whatever business you're in, whatever you're passionate about, there's a place for you in cannabis. And, you're talking about how people their lives are changed by, people in their lives or incidents in their lives. And I can speak to the man that created this Cannabis Community Project. He got into it because his brother died of cancer. And he knew the impact that cannabis could have in helping his brother. So that's a huge thing. I mean, that's one beautiful, great, huge thing that occurred. And if everybody that was so passionate about helping or doing something did something similar to what Brainstorm did, the world would be a better place overall.
I have met a bunch of what they call marijuana refugees, people who have come to the state specifically so that their children, most of whom have some sort of an intractable epilepsy, can be treated. And they're here at huge hardship because they don't want their kids to die. And they will. They will die without some sort of treatment. And a lot of these people are at the end of their rope. They've tried everything else. They don't want their kids to be little zombies. Not all of them. I know one family where they tried Haley's Hope, and for a week the child made incredible progress, but then was back to baseline the following week. But there are examples of what seems nearly miraculous. I mean, what I tell my friends is like, with drinkers, they're happy drinkers and angry drinkers and crying drinkers and all. Cannabis is very much, it depends on your body type and your chemistry. It works for some people, and for others it doesn't. It might make them cranky or paranoid or whatever. It really is a matter of getting to know what it does for you. My body happens to really like it.
Mine too, overall. Well, is there anything you want to add in closing?
If you're thinking about getting involved in the industry, do your research. Do a lot of reading. BluntNetwork.com, site I work for, we've put together a very good Cannabis 101 resource guide on all sorts of things, the different types of cannabis, the history, growing and all that. But really branch out and read a lot. And also realize there's a lot of contradictory information out there. All these medical studies that are going on, one will say black, the other will say white. Just really take everything with a big bag of salt. And enjoy it. I mean, it's a joyous industry in a lot of ways. I think it makes people happy. I enjoy going to a lot of these events because people are upbeat. It isn't just a matter that we're all going to be rich, because we're not. But it's just, people are like, this is cool. This is fun. This means something. So enjoy it.
Last question I have for you, Bruce Kennedy, famous national writer and journalist. I'm looking for your deepest cannafession. Tell me the best or worst memory you have related to cannabis.
Oh, I got a couple that I can't even talk about because of statute of limitations. But I'll tell you one.
The statute of limitations.
Yeah. Growing up in New York City, I worked in news, and this is a long time ago, and I actually had to go to my newsroom on my day off to get my paycheck. Remember that? Before things were, electronically transferred? Mm-hmm. I had to go and pick up my paycheck, and then I was going to go meet my mother for dinner later that evening. I go get my paycheck, and while I'm walking around Midtown Manhattan, I meet a friend who I haven't seen in a while, and we catch up, and right there by Rockefeller Center, he pulls out a joint. He goes, "I know an alleyway. Let's go." So we got good and stoned, and he had good stuff. However, my mother works for the New York City Police, all right? And, I was in my 20s at this point, but as a teenager, she'd come and, sniff me. It's like, "Are you in that stuff?" And I'm like, no, Mom, no, Mom. Of course, made sure to change my clothes or whatever. So anyway, I'm like, oh, dear, I'm going to go meet Mom, and I'm going to smell of dope. So what did I do? I went into the nearest bar I could and drank a beer, because I knew that at least she'd smell the beer first. And that would be my camouflage, and if I was acting goofy, she'd blame it on the alcohol. So it worked. You had a beer. We were going to have beer with dinner. Why are you having a beer now? I don't know. So anyway, that's my can of confession. I actually had to disguise my enjoyment of marijuana with a beer once.
The worst part is that your mom was working for the police force.
She actually knows what I do now, and she approves.
Well, she's a good mom, and she knows the business. She sees $7 billion in a year in one state. I want to thank you so much for joining us, Bruce Kennedy. Renowned journalist, can be found on bluntnetwork.com and look for his name many, many places on the internet.
Writing for everybody.
He's everywhere. He is the expert. So I want to thank you, Bruce Kennedy. I also want to thank all of our listeners here on Cannabis Community Project. Follow us on all the media. You can hear us on our website, cannabiscommunityproject.com. Look for us on Facebook, iTunes, Google+, Massroots, SoundCloud, Twitter, Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, Tumblr, and, of course, YouTube.
You're making some of that up, aren't you?
No, this is really all the market channels that Brainstorm has done. He's amazing. This whole project is just amazing. Anyway, I'm Kate Mullen. I'm here for Brainstorm on Cannabis Community Project. We look forward to hearing from you. Please email us at contact@cannabiscommunityproject.com. Thanks for your time. Tune in next week, and we'll talk to you then.